Hello everybody, this is Nick with ConsciousCTRL and I am back. I took a long hiatus. A large part of me felt like I was avoiding ConsciousCTRL for different reasons in life, but also partially because I felt like I didn't have my shit together, because I am still on the journey and I am still learning and I have so much to learn and we can learn together. Doesn't mean I can't share information and talk about ideas. So that's what we're here to do today. In fact, this is going to be a new segment of ConsciousCTRL where I'm not actually talking about ConsciousCTRL. I'm going to be doing reaction videos. As you can see, I have here pulled up two astrophysicists debate free will. It's a Neil Degrasse Tyson video and from his YouTube channel Startalk. And I like it because, you know, at the end of the day, ConsciousCTRL, I've always said, is somewhere between science and religion. And it's meant to be talking about ideas, about higher level ideas versus lower level ideas. It's about the fact that when you go through life, there's real things that you come across, and you're like, wow, this is deep, this has sophistication, this has meaning to it. And we recognize the depth of those things, but it's almost like most of it is uncategorized and a lot of it is elusive. It's you have these random deep conversations with random people at random points in your life, and maybe some people that you can have more with than others, but the idea of this is to do reaction videos to other people in society that are talking about real ideas and discussing them. There's often times where I'm listening to a podcast or watching a video and I just wish I was in the room to talk about it, and so instead I'm just going to talk about it with you guys. So here I have pulled up two astrophysicists debate free will, and let's get into it.
Charles, I want to compare notes.
Okay.
On free will.
Oh, one of my favorite things
Isn't
to ask
it?
about.
I'm going to skip the intro so that I don't get...
By things that
Everything has an end.
Is true that at some level... Here's my take. It is true that at some level of resolution that we can observe, causality is absolutely true. Given these initial conditions, this is what will happen afterwards.
That's the physicist in
That's the
speaking.
physicist in you speaking.
Exactly.
So if you take it to its logical conclusion, then there is no free will because everything is predetermined by things that...
Everything has an antecedent.
Whether
Right.
you know it or not, something is causing it to happen.
Something
right?
precipitated the thing
That's
that
right.
caused the thing
That's
that
right.
made
It's
that
always
happen.
going to happen. But
Right.
there is also stochastic uncertainty in the universe. It's built in. There's randomness, there's unpredictability. Yeah. And
Chaos.
so you have to ask, I think, if you're a physicist, what level of chaos actually affects you to the extent that you could actually make an instantaneous decision based on other stuff that's not necessarily in your past experiences or what you have just seen in your current environment. Right?
But wouldn't all those past experiences and your current environment, despite the fact that if you're introducing an element of chaos so that you've never experienced this ever before, your experiences that you have had would then inform your decision about the thing that you've never experienced.
Your inform is the word.
Oh.
Is it
Rather
inform
than
or dictate?
predicate. Right.
Right. Or
Right.
require.
Oh.
Right. That's the thing. Yeah. Let's say you're in a room with a whole bunch of audience members.
You know, it's the idea of whether or not people are actually different or not, right? Like, are you just the manifestation of your genetics with the circumstances that you've been in, right? The combination of nature and nurture, or do you actually have free will? Are you able to make decisions? And honestly, I would think that spontaneity is proof to the counterpoint that there is free will. I think that, you know, oftentimes things happen by coincidence, and sure, your circumstances has a lot to do with things, but you can take twins in the same circumstances and they can make different decisions about their lives and end up with completely different lives or completely different skill sets or whatever the case may be. And, you know, I guess the cop-out answer is always, yeah, but that was always going to be the case. But, you know.
Black. In that moment, you have many things you could do to turn it into a laugh point.
True.
Right? You hear silence and you'd be like, oh, that was good. And everyone laughs. Or, you know, so you make some
Or
sort
is
of
this
comment.
mic on? You know,
Yeah,
that's
right.
the old one.
Right.
You know, what do you do? Do you have the freedom to choose one of several choices that you had designed from your past, that you prepared to deal with that eventuality? Or is the choice made for you already?
Less experienced.
Well, I could also make the argument that you do have the ability to choose, because that's literally what the entire role of the frontal parietal control network is. It's the executive network in your brain. It's a part of your brain that is responsible both for perceiving options and making a decision, because in order to make a decision, you have to be able to perceive what options are available to you. And that's why some decisions can be hard, because we perceive actually less options than we do have. You know, you can get into this mind state of only being able to think that you have option A or option B and you're screwed either way, right? But there's typically an option C. It's just, are you perceptive to it? So that's a big part of your decision-making process, and there's an entire network, a functional connective network in the brain that's dedicated to that. Yeah.
He might not dig out of that hole as effectively or efficiently.
Exactly.
But if you've been in 100 cases where you had a joke bomb, you have data on how to pull out of it.
Exactly.
So statistically, you have a chance of getting people
And it
to
happens
smile.
instantaneously.
Right
You
in
don't
the
even
moment.
realize that it's happening.
It's in the
you know?
moment.
But yeah,
Right.
Did you have free will to not?
see, that's
Right.
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 So now,
Right, because I would argue that free will could also be in the form of negligence more than anything. Because what if you're a stand-up comedian that's on tour, and you've done 100 shows and you've bombed, you have that experience, and then in typically every other night you would have made that decision, but tonight you had an off night and you didn't recover in the way that you know how and that your body knows how to. All your prior experiences would have informed that you would have done that, but maybe there was just a moment of negligence where you didn't step up to the plate and the moment bypassed you. Is that free will, right? Because maybe you were supposed to do that, and in fact by not doing that you kind of altered your own path and made a worse one for yourself. But either way, it's free will, is it not?
that would be interesting, because here you are in a place where your instinct, your training, and
Your
your
10,000
desire,
hours, 10,000 hours,
right,
whatever it is.
will, as a reflex, cause you to say this, this, and this, and then people go, wow, that was great. Look how he turned it
So,
around.
Charles, can I say in that comment
Yeah.
that he preloaded his neurosynapses so that in that moment, they all tripped.
Right.
They tripped meaning triggered to go to the solution to
Right.
that.
Right, again, this bypasses the idea of not doing that, though, right? This is not accounting for the situations in which you maybe don't do it, right? It's not like it's a guaranteed given because he's loaded his synapses that every single time they're going to fire simply if mathematically the right action potential happens. Sometimes people perform, sometimes people don't.
Same is true.
But then I wouldn't have free will at that point.
That's
It
what
would
I'm
just
saying.
be a response. What I would have is a
Right.
response to a
That's right.
situation, not
Right.
necessarily. I wasn't really choosing that.
It chose it for you.
It chose it for me.
You have 5 choices, and then your system chooses one of the 5. Or
Right.
In that moment.
in that moment, right?
Correct.
And so in that moment, you are not exercising free will. Did you set it up, though, with free will in the past so that you could react this way deterministically, but you actually were in control of the circumstance, right? Here's another physical example of that. A football player is trying to sack a quarterback. The quarterback jukes left. The person trying to sack the QB doesn't have enough time to think about whether to move left or right or up or down. It has to react based on years of training and practice and experience. So in that moment, that action is not free. But in the setting up of that moment, if it was free enough, does that constitute free will? From a physics perspective, it might not. Then again, from a psychological point of view or from a biological point of view, it might.
Wait, what good are you not landing on one side?
See, I was gonna say I like this guy. He's actually kind of objective. He's able to entertain both ideas, and I think that's important. Anytime I'm watching someone, I mean, you know, obviously this is a show and they have to have content, and he's on here to debate, you know. But in a debate, if you've ever been in a debate club or anything like that, you choose a side and you argue it. That's the point of it. But you know, I like being able to play with both options. I like being able to wonder, is there free will or is there not? Because on the one hand, personally, you know, I wonder it all the time. I wonder if there is fate. You know, me and my girl, we talk a lot about Chinese string theory, which is that, you know, essentially all of our destinies are and fates are this bundled ball of yarn, you know, with many different people's paths intertwining. And as time is going on, you're pulling out and unraveling this piece of yarn, and people's paths are going to cross at certain points in time, and because of that, other things happen, and you may need to be this for this person right now so that in their journey they're going in this way. You know, I believe that there's a lot of truth to that. I've experienced a lot of truth to that personally, but I wonder if, you know, you don't still have the ability to jump upstream to you know, to go against the current, to go against fate and mark your own fate. But
Side or the other.
Yeah.
I don't need you to. It could be this, it could be that, and I'm right both ways.
Yeah.
Whichever the actual answer is, I was right.
Yeah. Well, he's saying I don't really have the free will to make that determination. I'm going to be right or
the truth is somewhere in the
Let's,
middle.
let's just ask an opinion. In my opinion, I would like to have free will exist in this universe, even though philosophically it can be argued that it does not exist.
Are you happy with a world where you perceive free will even if it isn't?
Ooh.
That's a good
This
question.
has to do with the movie Arrival, right, starring Amy Adams,
Yes.
where
It's
if
a great
you know
movie.
how your future is going to turn out, would you like to live your life anyway? Right? And the answer is yes, I would. But
Okay.
I still would like to think that the future is not yet predetermined.
No, but I know what? It's different. I'm not saying it's predetermined and you know it. I'm saying, would you still be happy with life if some alien said, "Look, dude, your life is predetermined. There's nothing you can do about it. Keep on believing you have free will," and then they go back to their planet.
You're a puppet on a string.
Puppet on a string
That's
from a free will
from a
puppet.
you're a free will puppet on a string.
What I would say in that case is that I would hope that the knowledge that I have that puppet on the string circumstance allows me to circumvent it. I can find a way. If you know, it's fate, right? You've seen so many Greek mythology stories where you try to avoid the fate of whatever the gods have
And
destined
the act
for
of
you.
avoiding it
The act
is
of
one
Right,
example.
right.
Like Oedipus, for example.
Oedipus
Right.
Right.
Be the
Killing his mother, father, and marrying his mother is funny. Yeah, no, me and my girl were talking about this too. Literally, like, you know, you've seen all those movies of like this guy sees his fortune and tries everything he can to avoid it, and this becomes everything that ends up making it actually come true in the first place. It's, again, it's like you wonder, like, or I don't know, have you guys ever done the Bandersnatch, like Netflix thing, where you could choose different options, and as you go through the different choices, it's an A-B scenario each time, so you have two different options to choose from, and each decision sends you down an alternate timeline, right? I guess that's like the multiple universes theory is, like, in every moment that you make a decision, you are creating a new timeline, and maybe that's kind of where it goes a little bit deeper, right? Like, is there only one timeline in which everything is fixed and set because your decisions are already, you know, predetermined and one informs the other, like he was talking about from a physics standpoint? Or if there is free will, is it just one completely chaotic, unpredictable universe? Or is it maybe, you know, actually multiple universes? It's an interesting thought.
the most
Famous of those.
egregious
Yeah.
example. Yes.
Sorry.
So the bottom line is, yes, I would still be satisfied with trying to do something different, because even the illusion of trying to do something different is in itself a form of free will. Physics-wise, though,
It's not.
that's the challenge.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So Neil, if you had to right now decide that free will does exist or doesn't exist, what would you prefer?
My thinking over the recent years, because I didn't used to think about this at all, my thinking over recent years is leaning towards the absence of free will for practically everything we think and do in our lives. And I base that on the fact that over time, things that we have done as people in our species, at one time was, you are totally to blame for that, or something you did, or something we've learned, no, this person is more susceptible than you are to addiction.
Right.
There's a biochemistry there. This person cannot just be made the life of the party because they're on the autism spectrum. They don't control that. in the way you might think they should, just because you're the life of the party. As you add up all of these things, let's go back to epilepsy, where before that was even a word, you were occupied by the devil. Did you do something bad? Or, well, you knew it was not everyone knew you were not in control of it. But today, no one is saying, did you have the free will to not have an epileptic seizure? Of course not. Do you have the free will to not be depressed? The person who's ready to jump off the bridge, in that instant, do they have the free will to not jump off the bridge? I don't think so.
I do.
And the more I add up and explore the human condition, I'm forced to conclude that the direction we are headed is that we are all products of an absence of free will. And as a result, society needs more compassion for people who do not otherwise fit in.
I like the compassion part, but I think that's a lazy perspective. I think that's one that is just removing accountability, because I believe that you do have the free will. And again, I believe that you have the free will to or not to do. And I feel like some people are better at free will. I feel like willpower is, like Green Lantern, where it's like it can be measured. Like you have a series of decisions, and you can choose to make the right one, or you can choose to make the wrong one, or you can choose to make not one at all. And perhaps you even on top of that spontaneously make those decisions, or perhaps you through careful consideration make those decisions. Either way, I do believe that you have the capacity to make those decisions. I certainly believe that the guy on the edge of the ledge could decide not to do it. I feel like there's probably many people who have been on a ledge and decided not to do it before. You know what I mean? It's not, like that would suggest that there's 100%, unless he's saying that those people who actually did jump had a predisposition to do that. But either way, I feel like willpower and free will is a real thing, and I think it comes and goes. I don't think it's I don't think it's genetically involved, but I guess it is genetically involved, but maybe not genetically predetermined, I would say.
See, I have the exact opposite position in my own mind.
Yeah, I like this
feel
guy.
that it is because of the absence of free will that you see in most behavior, that it is that 1% of free will activity that moves us in the right direction,
Right.
bends us toward compassion, takes the arc of history toward justice.
But but going back to what Neil just said, there are people who actually suffer from personality disorders, that suffer from brain disorders, where they can't do what you just said. They can't express compassion. They can't move towards the...
But again, to say can't removes accountability. You're almost putting the person in a box in which they absolutely can't now, because they believe that they can't. In order to do it, you have to believe that you can do it. It's almost like a hero arc, right? Where, like and if you're watching a show, the person takes it upon themselves to do certain things. Maybe they aren't in every situation some extraordinary, person. And again, the cop-out answer would be to say, well, he is the chosen one, right? Like he made those decisions and he had that will because he is the right person to do it. He's the person who ends up becoming the hero, But I still believe that, to the guy in the red shirt's point, that the majority of non-free will seeming decisions, the fact that you use the word majority proves the point of those 1% chaotic, random, upstream decisions, right? And at the end of the day, that's also how the universe seems to be structured in general, right? There's order and chaos. There's always order and chaos. It's a duality in every situation, in every religion ever. There's a duality of order and chaos, right? And I mean, Elon Musk himself said entropy is the final boss of physics, right? Entropy is randomness. What did the guy say? What was his word? Stochastic, right? The universe is stochastic. So, I would agree, maybe perhaps most of the universe is predetermined, but you do have the free will to change things in each moment. And the more that you do that, the more powerful of a human you are. Maybe we're the only people with free will. Maybe animals truly don't have free will under a certain level of consciousness. That's another interesting thought. Are we the only ones with the perception of choice? Who knows?
No one even thought to analyze it that way,
Right.
as a brain disorder.
Yeah, you were just
Correct.
an a-hole.
Yeah, exactly.
That was it.
Now,
Like,
if they can't, you can. You can show that person compassion or understanding.
So here-
and therefore, free will as an entity exists.
Charles, you're drawing
Even
a
if-
line
even if
that I have seen be in constant motion over the decades and over the centuries. That
Interesting.
line that you're saying, they don't have free will, but I do.
Uh-huh.
I don't know that I can.
See, I have free
Why?
will
People are
over some
different.
things and not over others. Someone can see me
That's
and
it.
say, that person needs help in this way and has the free will to help me. I see somebody else who needs this help and free will. Together, it is a network. It's not that any
So
individual
you
is
have to
superior
draw the
the other.
line for every individual and even
Why?
perhaps for society.
Okay.
Does the criminal who's born in poverty have free will to not be a criminal if most of the people in prison came in below the poverty line? So there's some sociological rating there.
So,
Sure, but it's still a choice, and it may be a hard choice to make, and maybe the factors and circumstances make it a harder choice. But some people are gonna have that resiliency. Some people in that ghetto are gonna have the drive and the free will to make it out against all odds. Like, I think it's, I think it can be mutually coexistent. I don't know why he has to get all political and make everything be a strict side, but I believe that this, obviously, the socioeconomic factors, the criminal who was born into poverty, sure, has factors stacked against him, and that makes it harder. It makes the action potential higher, right? So action potential is in the brain when you have a neuron. It's the amount of energy that's needed for the neuron to actually fire. If it gets up to this threshold, this energy level, then it can fire and it trips and it sends electrical information to the next one, right? So lowering the action potential lowers the amount of energy that is needed to trip it, so it can trip over and over and over, so you get hyperactivity, right? But if you raise the action potential, well, the energy could get all the way up to here and not trip the neuron to be able to send that electrical information, right? So maybe these circumstances and what he's saying raises your action potential to the point where free will is difficult. It takes a lot of energy, a lot of willpower in order to quantifiable willpower to make that decision, even if you might perceive it, right? Like, maybe you're obese and your entire family is obese and you all have poor habits and whatever the case may be, and you see cupcakes sitting on the counter and you maybe in one moment think, maybe I shouldn't eat these because they're unhealthy, but you ignore that and you eat it anyways, right? I feel like everybody has done that. But again, it's like the susceptibility, the enticingness of the cupcakes, your maybe genetic disposition or whatever may raise that action potential, but that doesn't mean that it's impossible to get enough energy to trip the neuron. It just means that it's harder, right? It's harder. Of course it's harder. But I still believe that in moments of great resolve, humans have the ability to swim upstream, to go against fate, and to have free will.
That where we are less susceptible to that force.
I think that's a great question, analogy. Let's say this. Say those folks who have been branded criminals by our society are incarcerated.
Yes.
We can then, who we're fortunate enough not to face those same circumstances, who are not incarcerated, can look at these incarcerated people and instead of saying we must keep them away from society, welcome them back.
so that's called restorative justice.
Yeah,
that's
and
what you're
that's a
talking
free
about.
will example of the exercise of free will
Of society.
of society toward individuals who may not have had the options, had the life experience to recover from a bombed joke.
I saw an old movie
Yeah.
where there's a guy who was a junkie.
Yeah.
Right? And he needed help. But they said, no, the cops came and arrested him because he was a junkie.
Right.
Today, you wouldn't do that.
Right.
You would say the person needs help.
They need, right.
Right.
They're-
Even if that person
Treatment.
had robbed somebody,
Right.
that person needs treatment. And the people
that's
who
fair.
cannot shake whatever it is that afflicts them tells me that free will cannot be as free as we think it is.
Or I would argue as cheap as it is, as you think it is, because, or as easy as you think it is, because again, maybe addiction just pushes that action potential up so high that those neural pathways are so like deeply etched that in order to take a new one, the action potential down a new path is massive, right? So, I mean, when do people truly change in life, just anecdotally? Only in their lowest moments, when they choose to, right? You can instill anything you want to into a person, anything. You can lecture them for hours, you can go over things over and over and over again, but the only time a person will truly change in their life is when they choose to, when they reach the level of energy at which they meet the action potential. And again, maybe addiction makes that way harder, right? Especially the level of addiction, higher the action potential, whatever the case may be. But doesn't mean it's impossible. You know, again, if he wants to choose sides here of absolutes, it doesn't mean it's impossible. Maybe it's so ridiculously hard that it's unlikely going to ever happen for certain people because their skill level, their energy level is just low, and their action potential needed in order to make a change is just way too high. And so you could argue that it's impossible for them, maybe, but like, even the right person with the right amount of time going in there and the right set of circumstances, I believe, can raise that energy level and lower that action potential level. So I would say, if we're going to have to draw a line, I would say I'm 100% on the side that free will does exist.
The shooter in the University of Texas at Austin.
I remember that.
Okay?
Yeah.
There's a movie they made out of it called The Tower,
Yeah.
where he left a note saying, I just want to kill people. Something must be wrong with my brain. Please, when I die,
Look into this.
They looked, and there was a tumor putting pressure on a part of the. In fact, that's how we learn anything about how the brain works when you have
This
situations like this.
Person had the free will
He
to
didn't
write
have the free
a
will.
note. He had the free will to write the note.
But
So he did not have the will to resist shooting. But that's the line that you were talking about is a partial one.
Why isn't that line always in motion as we learn more and more about how the mind
It
works?
is. It is.
Okay, so then maybe it's a line of convenience today, but tomorrow we're going to find out, oh my gosh, that person has no real free control over their behavior, over their personality, over their tendencies, over their treatment of others.
It's not a line of convenience. It is, in your words, a perimeter of ignorance. When Newton said we couldn't explain certain things,
Right.
God must have done it.
Of course.
That's a God of the gaps.
Of course.
That delineates what we don't know. The line you describe, I hope, is in fact that perimeter of ignorance which we slowly are moving toward and moving so that we do understand what the true nature of free will is.
So this is where people will push back. Most people are concerned not
So, by the way, I think he was saying that, sure, maybe things are predetermined to some extent, but we are still so ignorant of that all we can do is practice our free will anyways, I think.
the actions, but the consequences. So what they're thinking about is the punitive response to someone who does something wrong. And is a punitive response a deterrent for somebody doing something wrong or doing something wrong in the future?
Especially if they don't have the free will.
Right.
So there's the other side of this entire analysis is how does society interact with people who are being brought into the circle day by day. We're learning what we have control over and what we don't, biophysiologically, intellectually, emotionally.
Yes.
Why do people need anxiety meds? Do they have the freedom to not
They have
be
children.
anxious?
That is why. That is why I'm telling you, I'm taking them every day, and I got 3 reasons that I take them every day.
Some kids need them because they have parents.
Oh,
I'm just saying.
Very nice, very nice.
Okay, so Charles, if we're going to exit this conversation,
Yeah.
if we find a point of agreement, it's that this perimeter of ignorance, we recognize inside the perimeter there are forces operating against free will,
Yes.
our physiology, our neurochemistry,
Yes.
and physics,
Yes.
that surely that perimeter may grow,
Yes.
but it's possible that there's a limit to how far it will grow,
Yes.
beyond which we have to admit the existence of free will.
Yes.
Okay,
Right.
I'll give you that.
There.
There we go.
That's a great
All right. It doesn't have to be absolute in one direction or
Correct.
another.
So it's a bit more fluid. Okay.
And I'm okay
Alright.
with that. There is uncertainty in the universe. I embrace it.
I'll
Right.
tell you this much. I've been married for 20 plus years. I do not have free will.
Oh, look at that face. Look at that.
On that note.
All right. We'll leave him a little better of a lift-off point. But yeah, so I would agree. I think that there are a lot of things. Obviously, you know, I'm been sitting here arguing free will the whole time, but I do truly believe that there's so many, that everything happens for a reason to an extent. You know what I mean? There's so many instances in my life where things just worked out a certain way or whatever the case may be, and it feels as if that was how exactly things should have worked out. And I gotta credit the fact that that could also be an internal bias, that a confirmation bias in a way of the past, you know what I mean, of looking back on my own experiences and thinking that is exactly the way it should have happened because that is the way that they did happen. So a sort of rationalization in a way. But I still do believe that, you know, there are such things as coincidences, there is such thing as fate to an extent, but I do also believe that you have control over that and that you have the ability to break out of that should you reach the right action potential. And I believe that that can be used as a lot of good and maybe even a momentum factor, right? Maybe that's your way of interacting with the universe, is changing it and molding it with your own decisions, with your own mind, right? And maybe there was some sort of set out plan that your life could kind of go, but you in each action decision kind of mold that plan and draw the picture yourself. And or you don't, right? Or you bypass life. You spend most of life watching TV or getting sucked into a phone. You're bypassing so many different decisions and what your life could be in each moment. And realistically, you know, you could drop everything right now and go move to Thailand or something. I struggle with that thought a lot. Like you could drop everything and completely change your life right now. It just has a really high action potential and needs a really high amount of energy to be able to actually get that and do that, right? But people do. And you know, there's even to that point, I mean, there's even people who are more susceptible to addiction, to spontaneous action, to Neil Degrasse Tyson's point, you know, susceptibility goes both ways. There's people who are susceptible to spontaneity, to unpredictable decisions, right? Well, I would argue that that's potentially an overactive free will area of your brain, right? I would have to do more research about that and maybe I'll come back to that, but that's an interesting thought. But let me know what you guys think in the comments, okay? I gotta go pick up my girlfriend.